Hello, hello. This is BlockSpaces Live. This is our weekly show from BlockSpaces. I am Rosa Shores. I am the co-founder of BlockSpaces. We are a product development studio focused on blockchain and distributed ledger technologies located in Tampa, Florida. We've been doing this show every week for the last 4 or 5 weeks, ever since we've been in quarantine. Today we're mixing it up a little bit because we usually do this show on Thursday, but going live on Friday today because, quite frankly, we've just been extremely busy this week. So that is a good thing. Really excited about this show. We've hit on a couple of topics over the last few weeks that are based really around projects that we're doing and that some of the things that we're seeing develop within our space. And this one today is really about a kind of a hot topic that we're seeing on what's considered sort of this network of networks, how this sort of network of blockchain networks are developing and the ramifications of business in a multi-blockchain world. That's something that is sort of a hot topic these days. So that's going to be our topic. We have an amazing panel that's going to speak to this that I'm actually honored to work with almost on a daily basis. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, Chris Tyler and Chuck Dyer. Chris, do you want to go ahead and do a little introduction, and then we'll get started with Chuck as well?
Sure. So Chris Tyler, I've been with IBM about 15 years. I focus on their IoT, blockchain and analytics technology, cloud services, and so forth. And I work with startup communities, startups, and advise them on technology. And how do we build a business again? How do we build data products? How do we build things that we're going to go to market together with? So, Chuck?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chuck Dyer. I've been working in the emerging tech space for just over 30 years. My background spans many areas, beginning with network and global data center design and operations in the early 90s, to application development and SaaS product development, to cloud and cloud native solutions design. For the last 6 years, I've been with DXC as Director of Product Development. And I was introduced to BlockSpaces in last August and have been working with them in an advisory capacity. But I'm excited to say I recently joined them as their Chief Operating Officer, and I'm excited to be here as part of the team.
Yeah, and we just, the ability to work with you guys on a daily basis has just been phenomenal. And kind of getting back to our topic of at hand, this kind of notion of a multi-blockchain world. And I think there's a lot of businesses trying to grapple with what does business look like without, one blockchain, much less multiple blockchains. And like I said, it's a kind of a hot topic in the blockchain space right now, this notion of interoperability of blockchains or integration of blockchains. And so we hear those words kind of thrown around in our space. And by our space, I mean the blockchain space as a whole. What does that really mean? I mean, what is this kind of notion of a multi-blockchain world? Chris, can you speak to that a little bit? Because I know that you have had kind of a very interesting visibility to some of those problems within the enterprise space.
Yeah, sure. So, I look at those two terms, interoperability and integration, and they kind of get lumped together a lot, right? And I kind of differentiate the two. Interoperability being, there are oftentimes technologies that kind of do something similar, right? And one may have a slight advantage over another, but I want to possibly use both for solving a problem. And I need those things to be interoperable. I want to be able to easily use one versus the other without having to change my application a lot, right? I want to be able, because they kind of do the same thing. I need them to be interoperable. And that's where you see things like industry standards coming up, right? You look at a database technology, things like Oracle database, DB2 database, they kind of do the same thing. They're relational technologies. JDBC is that connectivity layer that makes them interoperable, right? They don't necessarily integrate together, but they're interoperable. I can use Oracle, I can use DB2, they kind of do the same thing, and my application doesn't have to change a lot because the communication to them is JDBC, right? Integration is, okay, now I need these things to integrate because maybe they do different things, right? I need one technology to do So maybe one blockchain to do my track and trace. I have another blockchain that does payments. And so I need that integration. They're not really interoperable. They don't do the same thing, but I need them integrated because to solve business problem, they need to, there needs to be some level of integration between the two at some point, so that when a supply chain gets to a certain point in the in that process, somebody needs to be paid. So it needs to trigger a payment over to my financial services, or my payment-based digital currency blockchain. So that's kind of how I differentiate the two. Right? And from a business perspective, right, they need that to be fairly seamless, right? They need it to be where I don't, these are different technologies. I don't necessarily have to understand the complexities of what's going on in that technology. I just need it to do the thing that I need it to do. So.
Yeah, and so of course we hear that a lot when businesses come to us. They're just sort of like, we want a blockchain.
Yep.
Yeah, we would like a blockchain solution. Like, what does that even, mean? And so there was something that you said that I kind of want to like delve into a little bit more, is that this notion that there's different blockchains that do different things. And so a business, perhaps thinking, I think I need a blockchain for this, whatever it is that has inspired them to think that they need a blockchain, which could be numerous things, because any one business can have numerous business problems. We all know anybody that's been in enterprise, which I came from enterprise. So, these are very complex problems. This isn't just like kind of a one size fits all sort of thing. Can you kind of explain that a little bit more? This kind of notion that there's different like a blockchain protocol might be better suited for certain particular business problems?
Right. So, I mean, you look at something like track and trace, right? Where you're tracking and tracing assets, right? And there's attributes about that asset, right? So for food, like when was it harvested? Who harvested it? What was it fed? What was it sown with? When was it reaped? Who did it? All these different attributes about that asset that you need for that track and trace. Okay, so something like a Hyperledger Fabric that's really good at tracking those assets, right? Versus I need to pay somebody. Okay, so there's a single currency asset, and I need to govern who are the people in that transaction and what are the contractual terms that need to be met in order for that payment to occur, and what are the legalities that go around that payment. And so something maybe like an Ethereum or a Corda is much better suited for that. Okay, instead of trying to slam that into Hyperledger Fabric, use the technology that's best suited for that. What that means, though, is from a business perspective, okay, those are different technologies, different coding languages, and even different structures, right? So from anything that deals with tokens, there's some complexities that go around that token just to simply issue a payment, right? That a business doesn't need to understand, right? How do I build my base of tokens? How do I burn tokens? How do I create tokens? All those complexities that really, they just want to pay somebody. And so how can we hide those complexities, right? So.
Yeah, and Chuck, maybe you can speak to a little, because, in a lot of the conversations that we have just internally, we talk about sort of blockchain being the back end, but there's a lot of what we all kind of consider front end applications that businesses need to integrate into these blockchain networks. Can you speak a little bit to, like, what would that look like? What are we talking about when we're talking about, we have blockchain, but then there's other systems within any sort of business that are going to need to, whether or not they're talking to the blockchain or not, they need to have like a seamless integration with those systems. What can you give us some examples of what that might look like?
Sure, absolutely. So, Chris talked very in-depthly about the different types of things that blockchains can do and all the different technologies that goes in the back end. But at the end of the day, realistically, when you look at a company or an enterprise, they're using ERP systems, like Salesforce or Dynamics or NetSuite. They have financial systems. They keep track of their accounting and all those. They have logistics systems. So if they're a product-based company, they may have to get product from overseas to the US or whatever it may be. They also have e-commerce platforms where they have to be able to track inventory and delivery of systems. So when you look at the different types of things that blockchain is solving, you know, no one blockchain is going to solve every single problem. So you have different blockchains that focus on different types of solutions in different types of industries. So when you look at things like track and trace or data security or IoT device authentication, distributed identity, fraud proofing your asset management, you know, those are the types of things that are enhancements to those existing systems and back office systems that enterprises use that would like to be able to have integration into that natively through those applications to be able to provide that type of functionality and that type of visibility into their day-to-day systems where they don't have to have, you know, 5 screens in front of them to see all this different information in different systems. Bring it into one system and integrate it seamlessly.
Okay, very good. And then, you know, that is an excellent point. But why would, like, for example, what would be the benefit of integrating multiple blockchains? I mean, we spoke a little bit about that different blockchains are better suited for different things. Is there an analogy in, I mean, are we talking about something completely different? Like for example, you're talking about an ERP system. We're not necessarily talking about that an ERP system needs to serve the same purpose as a completely different. Are we thinking about these different blockchains as completely different kind of protocols for different kinds of systems, and that each one of those business problems sort of has its own different set of circumstances? Chris, do you want to speak about that a little bit? I think we have a question in the chat, so I'll grab that as well.
Yeah, so you know, from like an ERP perspective, right? If I'm tracking my supply chain and I need to trust my supply, right? Well, some of those I may have had long-term business relationships with, and sure, I can trust them, right? No problem. But as we've seen with the recent developments in COVID-19, where you've got new manufacturers of supplies that have not been in that business before, I need a way to quickly bring them in because I need that supply, but I don't have the long-standing history with them. So how do I trust them? And so distributed or decentralized identity platforms that can provide multiple verifications of trust for that supplier. Now, maybe I don't have them, but there's other people that can verify them. They have long-standing history with other buyers that can verify that, yes, they can supply, they're trusted and so forth, right? So I want to maybe integrate that decentralized identity into my ERP so that I can trust my supplier, right? And then, well, I need the track and trace, of course, right? Because I want to know how it was handled, who handled it, where did it go, was it held at the right temperature, did it meet the guidelines that I set forth in the contract and so forth, right? So I may want to have a track and trace blockchain behind the scenes that gives all of the trading partners the visibility into that supply chain. I don't necessarily want to give everybody access to my ERP, but we want to share that information around the track and trace so everybody knows when to expect things. Everybody knows that that things have been done properly in the proper time frame that they were expected and so forth, right? And then everybody wants to get paid, right? And so being able to seamlessly pay people, right? Sure, if it's all, you know, if everybody is in an area that can easily get paid via electronic funds transfer, okay, that's great. But now it's a worldwide audience and I'm getting supplies from all over the world, and cross-border payments are very costly and time consuming. They may take 7 to 10 days sometimes to clear that payment. Well, that's where digital currencies can start to play a part in this. And now we can reduce the costs that's necessary to pay them. So we may need to integrate some sort of digital currency or stable currency, stable coin type currency into this So now you're talking 3 different blockchain technologies, 3 different blockchain protocols that need to be integrated into just my supply chain.
Yeah, and we have a great question in the chat, which is completely on point. So the question is, any integrations or dependency on data sources like oracles increases your attack or failure surface? How do you think about mitigating that? And of course, that is the big, that is one of the big promises of blockchain, of course. It's a decentralized system that allows, different nodes to be able to be this sort of decentralized system that, makes that there's no one centralized source for attack vectors. So how would you, either one of you, want to speak to that? It's an excellent point. When we're talking about like an integration protocol that becomes like a single source of failure. So what is your thought process around that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to totally understand the question, but so from a decentralized perspective, right? Again, this is where that decentralized identity and trust of the people that I bring into my network, right? Public blockchains are very good for certain things, but private blockchains, only bringing the people into my business network that I know and trust, right? It is how some of that gets, avoided, right? I'm not just letting anybody into my network, right? So that can help reduce the number of attacks, right? Because I'm only letting those people in that I trust, that I've given access to my network.
Yeah. And so do you feel that, and I mean, this is a big, we've been in the blockchain space for a long time. And of course, this is as we talked about before, the difference between, integration and interoperability, this notion of, is blockchain one particular kind of protocol, or is there a spectrum of blockchain? That's hotly debated. That's incredibly hotly debated. And so this notion of a decentralized public permissionless chain within a business use case, do you feel like there is applicability, whether we're talking now or in the future or way into the future, the applicability of public blockchains within business, within enterprise? Either one of you, if you have any thoughts around that. Both of you have such an entrenched enterprise background. Yep. So understanding the scope of blockchain protocols and understanding that that's sort of a hotly debated topic, how in your minds are you seeing this notion of truly decentralized systems, public blockchain systems working within the scope of enterprise, either in the immediate or long-term future?
I think one of the things that's really interesting about blockchain and the emergence of blockchain and how businesses and enterprises can use it is really focused about industry specific on the public blockchain side. So take IBM Food Trust for an example. This is where you're bringing multiple producers and distributors and buyers all together into one single blockchain platform to be able to share and have that data shared. Now, obviously, as an enterprise, there's certain data that you don't want to be able to share with everybody out there, but to be able to have that interoperability between people within an industry segment to be able to allow them to work better and more efficiently and have more transparent data out there, I think is a great thing. Getting back to that question that came up in the chat about oracles, I think one of the interesting things, they were specifically talking about attack surface. When you're looking at decentralized apps running in blockchain, when that code is running in, a smart contract, that code isn't going to be changed. So in order to get that dynamic data, you have to go to oracles. And that's where that attack surface is going to be. Obviously this is emerging tech, it's new. There are a lot of things that have to be taken into account whenever you're developing these oracles and these oracle clusters that have this external data that you're going to be talking to be able to make sure that the nodes within that oracle are trusted and they're getting it from a reliable source. So there definitely needs to be some time and some thought and architecture put into limiting the attack surface of those oracles and those clusters to make sure that bad data is not getting into those decentralized apps.
Yeah, and do you see, I think that's one of the things, of course we have, we're very interested in the enterprise space. I came from enterprise, but, in my, before blockchain world, but, obviously we have deep roots in decentralized, fully decentralized, cryptocurrency token economics and all of that. So that's kind of like our roots, obviously. So in this space. So it is a very interesting question. And I feel like there is, as businesses start to become more comfortable and more familiar with blockchain and sort of the different ways that it can be used to solve some of their business problems, I do feel like that there's this very big opportunity for businesses to start to understand that, potentially they can be using more of a token-based blockchain, within their financial business problems, and some of these other more privatized down within their, maybe track or trace or whatever. So, I mean, I do think that there's such a range of complex business problems that there's not a one size fits all blockchain. And that my personal feeling is that there is this sort of spectrum of blockchain now. We can argue about it all day, whether or not something actually meets the definition of what somebody else thinks the word blockchain is. But the bottom line is it's out there now. And we're talking about everything from distributed ledger, which is almost like database 4.0 or whatever you want to call it, whatever number you want to ascribe to it, all the way down, all the way up to, these fully permissionless, decentralized blockchains. So I do find it all fascinating from one end of the spectrum to the other. Do you see that happening as well, either one of you, this sort of movement toward, as we become, as business in general becomes more knowledgeable about blockchain in general, this sort of evolution to, potentially mass adoption of more what the kind of the classic blockchain that people discuss is?
Yeah, I think, it's going to take some time, right? Enterprises are, you've even seen it with like cloud, right? When cloud first became, out there, businesses didn't want to migrate their workloads to the cloud. They were like, no, it has to be in my data center, right? And they're starting to figure out that, oh, well, these public cloud infrastructures, right? That's what they do. They have to focus on security because their customers, right, are the ones that, have the potential to lose, and their brand recognition, whoever's providing that public cloud infrastructure, right, they're going to take a huge hit if their customers suffer an attack. So they probably spend far more money on security and making sure that that environment is safe versus my data center ops, right, that has a finite number of people and so forth, right? So I think down the road, you're going to start to see that with blockchain as well. People are going to realize, wow, we can benefit from the power of the network, right? We can make sure that this is secure, right? And we can start to benefit from this power of multiple nodes that maybe aren't under our control, but are under control of people who really know blockchain, right? And so I think the enterprises will start to figure that out. And there are certain types of use cases where you need multiple nodes, right? You need that power of consensus across multiple nodes, not just a handful of nodes. But there's still those use cases where it makes sense to just have a small number of nodes on the network. And we're really just trying to provide that trust and transparency of these transactions. We don't need 1,000 nodes to do this. We just really need that visibility, and we need that trust amongst all participants. So
yeah, and this whole situation with this virus and this pandemic, I know that there's a lot of people, a lot of businesses suffering, a lot of businesses trying to get their head around, furloughing employees, much less, going into a blockchain project or whatever. But from our end, we've seen this almost sort of mass interest now. It really escalated. I mean, in my mind, I feel like this pandemic has probably accelerated blockchain adoption in enterprise by 5 years, and I really mean that sincerely. That's just from my end. what do you think has happened, either one of you, or both of you, what do you think has happened that has made businesses maybe stop thinking about blockchain as this, kind of newfangled thing that lives in, the R&D box within an enterprise, and put it more as a kind of a mission critical initiative? Either one of you, because I know you're both seeing it as well.
I think with all the stuff that's going on in the world today, we've really seen blockchain solutions take kind of a main stage in the media specifically. There's been a lot of press coverage with a lot of the things that have come to light, specifically in supply chain and food supply chain, that we see every single day. And blockchain has really kind of been that underlying technology that's really kind of bubbled up to the surface, that really addresses those types of problems head on. And companies, obviously, who are facing these problems that have been newly unearthed because of this situation, are really taking that second hard look at it and saying, this is something that we need to invest in. This is something that we need to integrate into our process. So I think you're right. I think it definitely has escalated the adoption of blockchain, and I think it's caused a lot of the projects in the blockchain space to really kind of reevaluate how they're approaching some of these use cases, and making some really ingenious changes and modifications to how they're doing it to really address things on a more immediate basis, as opposed to looking more longer term.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add to that as well, right? That you've seen these problems have probably always been there, but until they came to light, right, with COVID-19 and the pandemic, right, they weren't as broadly known. Like Chuck said, it wasn't in the media, but the problems have always been there. We just didn't see them, right? So, and blockchain, I think, is really suited very well to solve some of these problems, right? This rechanneling of things that we're seeing, not only in the food supply but in that PPE environment, where now you've got auto manufacturers making ventilators. Well, they don't have the connections into that supply chain, right? So blockchain can do that very well, and do it very rapidly. Food supply chain, he cut off half of the food supply chain, right, by closing restaurants, hotels, and so forth. Well, those people supplying those goods, they don't have the context to get into the retail channel, right? So blockchain is something that can make that happen very easily. And as you start to see worldwide supply of things coming in, we are getting partners into this supply chain, or into my business processes, that I don't have any relationship with. And I got to move at the speed of sound, right? So how can I do that more quickly? Well, I need someone to verify them. I need people to do that very quickly, and blockchain's very suited to do those types of things.
Yep, totally agree. And I could talk to you guys all day, and I usually do. But we are kind of coming up on time here. So
Yep.
Just real quickly to kind of wrap it up, BlockSpaces is working on a blockchain integration platform, in addition to some other products that we are developing that have kind of escalated since this whole pandemic. Maybe just a quick little, I would just, to toot BlockSpace's own horn here. What would you say, just quickly, Chris, and then Chuck, has been the most interesting and exciting thing about working with BlockSpaces over the last couple of months, as far as what we have in the works?
Yep. So BlockSpaces has that deep knowledge in multiple blockchain technologies, and they have their finger in a lot of different industries, right? And so from this problem that I've seen for a while about this blockchain integration, okay, they are uniquely suited to do this, to solve this problem, right? And nimble enough to be able to adapt the idea of how do we build this integration layer and solve some problems that have surfaced recently. So that's what I've enjoyed working with you guys lately, and for the last 2 years, right? You've got some great ideas, you've got some great knowledge of blockchain, and it's just been a pleasure working with you guys.
Yeah, I think obviously the main problem that you face today is there's hundreds of blockchain networks, all of which are siloed by either industry or use case. Lots of tribalism kind of going on in a lot of these projects. And, we've talked about this multi-chain world. But again, no single blockchain is appropriate for every single business problem. So when BlockSpaces is approaching this integration platform that we're building, we need to really look to integrate with legacy systems to make blockchain implementation, less complicated and less costly for the enterprise. So, the platform that's been built, it's a cloud-based platform that enables integration for private and public blockchains, allows transactions to be able to span that network, and execute efficiently from a single source. So we're really excited about it. We're really anxious to get it out there in front of people and demo it. So give us a ring.
Yep, definitely. And you guys are great. Love you so much. And your insights and kind of involvement with us, over the last, Chris, like you said, 2 years with you, and Chuck over the last, oh gosh, like at least 6 months now, but really specifically over the last few weeks has just been really invaluable. So, more things to come, and we're very excited about it. You can find us at blockspaces.io. You can email me directly, Rosa at blockspaces.io. And we'd love to talk to you more about blockchain. So we will see you guys next week. And thank you so much for being here. If you left something in the chat that we didn't answer, we will reach out to you and answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.